Okay, hi. So as video me told me, although embarrassingly, that my name is Martin, and I work in Rush Street Interactive Development LLC. That's quite a mouthful. So usually we use RSI. The company actually makes online gaming platform and wallets and stuff like that to US. So yes, and what I promised you I will talk about my journey. And this morning I started to think about who else had a journey and to have any parallels to bring about that. And first person or that I thought about is Bilbo Baggins from The Hobbit. And I thought about his journey and my journey, and they are similar because we faced many difficulties. And instead of dragons in my journey, there were screen readers. And instead of mountains of gold, I made our software a little bit more accessible, and it was a bit better. So yeah, but what I would like you to take away from here is that three things. First of all, to learn that accessibility testing, it isn't difficult. Second of all, that you, after the presentation and when you go back to your workplaces, would think about accessibility testing and maybe start doing it in your company. During the presentation, I hopefully show you why you should do it. And thirdly, that how I maybe if you see how I did it helps you to come up ways for you to find your own way. But before I move on, how many of you have ever done accessibility testing? Oh, quite a lot. So it might be a bit boring for you, but yes, it's my journey and I will tell you my lessons, so hopefully it will make you better at it and others can maybe then start based on this. But like every great journey, we start at putting down some definitions. So this is the definition that will come up when you Google accessibility testing, and it basically says that you test usability for people with disabilities like hearing, color blindness, old age. And that was the definition I used when I started the project I will be talking about. And and the people are shown on the pictures taken from Microsoft Inclusive Design webpage were the people I kept in mind when doing the testing. And yeah, it's an okay design, but as I discovered later, it has some flaws. And the flaws are that it doesn't cover people who have a disability which isn't permanent or which is situational. For example, like you see here, a parent holding a baby, but it in any case anyway hinders you to use whatever you do because you only have one hand. Also, there are a lot of people like myself that use glasses or corrective lenses, or for example use their device on the phone. So the definition before didn't cover that. And once I realized it, I needed a new definition. So that's when I basically put together this definition. Why is it a good one? Because as it includes a lot more people than before, then it's easier to sell it to your product owner, basically. Because you're not talking about minorities anymore, but majorities. And also, in designing your products, you understand that if your product is made more accessible, you actually make it more accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities that we saw in the first definition, but it also adds customers you have elsewhere, but their experience will become better too. So that's why I've settled on this definition instead of the one you get when you Google. So hopefully this or something similar will replace the first answer when you Google accessibility testing, it will include people with permanent disabilities, temporary disabilities, and situational disabilities. So, another thing I want to tell you about, and some of you might know about it, but others might not, is WCAG, and to be more precise, 2.1 version of it. So what is it? It's basically guidelines that say that if you answer to all these guidelines, you are accessible to everyone. It has 3 levels. Level A, that's the lowest. I basically see it as when you don't actively stop anyone using your product, but it's not very good. Then there is AA, where you don't have any blockages and everybody with all kinds of needs can use your product normally. And AAA, where you have added some kind of special assistive things to your web page. So, why these guidelines are important is because, for example, in US, where my company is currently operating, they use these standards as a standard in the face of law. So if companies have been sued, and then the court has decided that the ones that lost, the companies that lost, the courts have decided that they need to bring their accessibility to level AA according to WCAG. So if you haven't heard about them now, you will very soon. But okay, I will give you some context, what's my story about and how it began. So I was given, it was, as I said, the video me said, almost a year ago, and my product owner came to me and said, Martin, can you do analysis? What would it take for us to take us from A to AA? And I said that, what? The background in here is I'm not very experienced tester yet. I've been in testing world altogether year and a half, maybe even less. So at that point, I had been in testing for 3 or 4 months, and every new term was new to me, and I was given an assignment accessibility testing. The positive side was not knowing of anything about anything was that it didn't seem different to me. I was like, yeah, I will go to our senior QA and ask him. I went to him and asked that, yeah, accessibility testing, how you do that? And he said, yeah, I don't know. I used to work in this company, but we hired specialists from elsewhere and they did it. I'm like, okay. I have friends who are also testers, some of them in the audience, and went to them because they're also very experienced testers that worked in many companies, and asked that, yeah, but accessibility testing, how do you do it? And the answer I got, yeah, I don't know, I've never done it in any of those companies. So I was okay, maybe I'm asking the wrong people. I have a friend who's a UX specialist, and went to her and asked it, yeah, but you must know accessibility testing, right? And she said, or anything about accessibility about this point. And I got an answer that, yeah, no, I've never done it. I've asked a couple of more people, but in the end I realized that, yeah, nobody around me and not a lot of people at all haven't made it. That's have done any accessibility testing or have any awareness of accessibility. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, because to spread the word. And so the new testers coming after me or you would already know something about accessibility testing and do it in your workplaces. So, like any testing I do, I started with research. And in this case, as I knew nothing about it, the research phase took most of the time of the testing. The testing itself, when I found the right methodology and the had it everything, after the research, it didn't take much time. It was easy. But research took a lot of time. First question I had that, how do I know something isn't accessible? And well, it was the most important question. And if I know what's not, because I myself, although wearing glasses or contact lenses, don't know what the experience, and in that time I only kept in mind the people with disabilities. I don't know their experience, so how can I tell what's wrong for them and what's not? And the second point was that what kind of different needs are there? Like what kind of assisting programs there are, and what do they use, and how do they operate basically the internet and the computers? And the third important question I had was, yeah, but how will I do it? Because I needed to test our portal, which has like 20, 30 functions, and you can use them like in different ways altogether. So when I did research, I got an idea. First of all, I got nearly 100 oracles, because the WCAG 2.1 guidelines, they're basically an oracle, but they have 98 let's say nearly 100 points to them. The different points expecting different things. So I ended up with 100 oracles out of nothing, and that's not good either, because I couldn't keep track all of them. I found that there are so many programs, so many screen readers, so many different assistive programs. Then there was this audit you can run on Google Chrome developer tools that tells you where your accessibility mistakes are. Problem of that was that I got feedback on what I need to change, but I didn't understand why I need to change it, and what's wrong with it. And there were many programs promise you that they will run through your web page and give you answers, something like the audit did in Lighthouse. But these answers weren't good enough for me. So I was very confused about the programs. Then I found that there were 6 different needs that need to be covered. There are people who have problems with hearing. There are people who have problems with seeing, and there are 2 kinds of those. There are people who see badly or not at all, and there are people who are colorblind, or people who need to use high contrast view to watch things, and there are people who have a problem moving their hands. So basically 6 different kinds of things that make things inaccessible. And that seemed a lot after 100 oracles and 20 programs to try. And well, as I told you before, our web portal, you can basically, if you go around it randomly, you can just click here and then click there. And the question was that, should it be accessible? Yes, it should. But will we fix it? Will it get enough importance? But if I click it this way, will it get more attention? So I had a question that, what kind of testing should I do? So I narrowed it down. Basically, I narrowed it to 4 basic oracles, that their things should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. They're not my invention, but they are basically 4 main principles of WCAG, and they basically, so I took them from there. And I will talk about them a bit later on in more detail. And I decided that if player can do things that we consider one user's life cycle, then we can say that we're accessible. And then if we on that level are accessible already, we can start fixing random moving around parts. And I decided to use, I found a report that every year brings out the most popular screen readers, and altogether those three covered 80% of the usage. So I thought that's fair enough. If I use them, then that's fine. So perceivable. Under that Oracle, I found bugs like where a screen reader didn't recognize a button somewhere, or basically if seeing things was the only way to navigate that part of our portal, or if basically most of it was that if screen reader didn't understand it, or if yeah. And I found one screen reader that actually started reading you source code of every page. So I think people using it must be very good at with computers. It really annoyed me, but it was part of one of the three most popular. So yeah, but so that was the only program that covered most of it, because we couldn't hide our source code. So if it read it to you and you understood it, then it was there. But all the others that reads labels, etc., some of our things weren't understandable. And I realized that, for example, using labels, our operations had asked us to move those before, because when you hover on a button and it shows a text, it bothered them, so we had just removed it. But now we had to add it back because, well, it provides more accessibility to other people. Operable. It basically covered that part where I will talk about later, but I tried to use keyboard only when doing some testing. And basically, when I ran into some kind of, for example, pop-up traps, I go to a page, I navigate with keyboard only, a pop-up comes up, and I can't move on. I can't close the pop-up, I can't go anywhere. I'm trapped and at that pop-up, and so to move on, I need to reload the page and pray that the pop-up doesn't come again and jail me into that one spot. And yeah, I found a couple of few of those, because for some reason we like to show a lot of pop-ups to people, which is strange because people don't like pop-ups. At least I don't. So yeah, I ran into some of those. Luckily now we use less of them, so doing manual testing is much more comfortable. Thanks to that. So yeah, that's operable. And understandable basically is that it's not basically screen reader does the screen reader understand it, but it's like, for example, we had a bug where accessibility bug where you had a guideline, you're registering and you have guidelines what one or other field means, but some of that information, some of the fields didn't have that information, so we didn't interpret what that field means to a person, and that's not accessible. So we needed to add some information fields. And robust, that was one of the eye-opening experience for me, at least, because I tried Firefox, Chrome, and Edge. I think IE 11 also, because for some reason there are still 10% of the people using it. I don't think they will ever stop, so we will always support it. But yeah, so these were the browsers I used. So take it 3 screen readers, and I thought that, like, for example, Edge and Chrome both are running on Chromium, so the experience will be the same. Oh, and I used Apple Computer also on macOS. So I thought, yeah, that the experience, at least on those, will be similar, but it wasn't. Every screen reader and every browser combination worked very differently, and I got very different experiences. And that gave me signal that there's something more wrong than accessibility, because it seemed so far that we don't have any browser-specific problems, but as the screen readers brought out that they behave so differently, I started to suspect that we do have problems with robustness in general. So that was also beneficial for that also. Yep. And talking about user, or as we call it in gambling, player lifecycle, basically the lifecycle itself is a user registers, logs in, consequentially deposits money, plays, and takes the money out. And then the lifecycle begins again, just maybe not with creating a new account. So I thought that basically if I can do those things, additionally play games and use our promotional tools, we have a great bingo game, for example, that people enjoy. If they can use those promotional games and bring money in and bring money out, and then we can consider that we're accessible. Even if it's, for example, you can't from withdrawal page move directly to deposit page, I thought that will be a problem that we will solve later, because it's not people usually don't do that. So I didn't worry much about that. And so I started going through all those flows. So yeah, as I've talked about, then I used three most popular screen readers, which one of which was the native one that comes with Mac OS, and for accessibility-wise, I'm not a Mac person, but accessibility-wise, I discovered that it's the best. The experience I had with the screen reader they had, one good feature, at least in my opinion, was I could change the voice, while other screen readers all used similar voice, and doing it day in, day out, listening to the same voice telling you things can be annoying. So switching the voice was pretty great for me, but also I got stuck a lot less with their screen reader. It understood a lot more than the other screen readers, but understood fine as well. And others not doing well in parts, that wasn't their fault, it was ours we needed to fix. And people also ask me a lot that did I tie my eyes and try to do things blindly? Yes, but that actually doesn't tell me anything, because it simulates if I just had lost my vision and then tried to operate something, and that's not how things work. But yeah, but I did try it just for the fun of it, and it was difficult to do anything. Hopefully with hopefully at one day our product will be so accessible that even I can do it eyes closed with screen readers only. But that day, unfortunately, is far ahead. So for us to be that good. So keyboard only. That was one of the places where I was ignorant, because I thought that why? Because if you can move, for example, only one hand, you can use the mouse, can't you? But actually, blind people use keyboard only, because using mouse is difficult, because it's small and moving around, and even though screen reader will tell you where the mouse is pointing at, you can't have overview where something is. So using keyboard only and having sequential functions going in sequence is great. One of the most difficult part was using high contrast, because I got massive headaches. Now if I still do, I'm getting used to it, because now if I do regression testing in high contrast, for example, my headaches aren't that bad anymore. But couple of hours in high contrast view, yeah, it's trippy. And I did things in large text also. Then I did all my testing, I took notes. So how do I report it? I basically made a gap analysis. We've used it as we went, gambling is highly regulated, then we use it that we have the laws and we compare our gap to it, basically, that what we cover and what we need to improve to be in compliance with that regulation. So I thought that, yeah, I will use the same thing. So I took my notes and started putting them into categories and comparing them to the points of WCAG. So, for example, if we had a problem in non-text content, I added all the blocks to there. If we had somewhere we were in, I used dark red where we weren't even on A level, because where we wanted to go was double A, and we thought we are on A level. And what we did where we were okay, I used green and brought everything out and prioritized them also a bit. So if we started fixing them, then we would have the priority list. Sometimes we have time for bigger developments, then we can tackle bigger problems. And sometimes we have less time, but we have low-hanging fruit over there, so we can fix that. So why? In my case, well, my company was interested in doing that, but I know it's not that easy to convince your product owner sometimes that something that directly doesn't bring you money in tomorrow is worth doing. So I created basically 3 arguments, and yeah, I will go in more detail, and they've come in handy time to time when we're talking about the specific bug. Then I have 3 tools to influence somebody of getting it fixed. And hopefully this will help you convince your employers also to do some accessibility testing and make your products more accessible. First of all, that's the only reason you actually should need, because internet should be the great equalizer, I think, at least, because you don't have to tear down stairs. It's so easy to make things accessible. So why exclude anyone? Because everybody wants to enjoy things, and even sometimes online gamble, maybe. So yeah, so you should do accessibility testing, or your company should just do it, because it's not cool to exclude people from your products because they want to use it. But if you need any further proof you should do it, then actually you will be made accessible quite soon. The US Supreme Court just last week, a couple of weeks ago, decided on case of Domino's Pizza that blind people can sue for inaccessible web pages. And as you can see, there were 814 cases in 2011. I don't have last year's numbers, but I expect it to be over 100 now. And it will rise a lot more after the Supreme Court decision. And also Europe has planned to move in with accessibility laws and make it mandatory for public businesses in 2021, maybe sooner. And well, if some of you handle GDPR as I did, and on the very last moment, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't. Yeah, it was something I will never forget, and I will have in my nightmares forever. So yeah, and in 2021, if you're not accessible by then, you most likely European Union will overreact again, and it will be GDPR all over again. So it's better to start today than in a hurry. And thirdly, it's actually not that expensive, because, well, creating new products out of zero, that's the easiest part, to see that you create everything new already accessible. I will show some guidelines later how to show that, but also in US at least, the average person with disability earns more than a person without. I've thought that it's most likely because they're doing working with their head on computers, etc., where the wages are higher. And also, in US, 10% of the people, and in Europe I think it's 15, but don't hold me to that, have reported they have a disability. And I'm not talking about the people who are wearing glasses or who are just, for example, old. And our society is aging, so there will be a lot more older people. And they also need to use sometimes screen readers or big zoom in 130%. So you have at least 10%, but actually 20 or 30% of the people who you're actually telling at the moment that, yeah, I don't do business with you. And that's 10% of more customers you could have. And if you do it today, and if you become accessible today, and your competitor is not, you win those 10% all for yourself. So if your PO or business side or whoever decides what you do doesn't have a heart, then they at least like money. I think so. But the work will never end, and we are slowly but surely implementing automated testing to see that we don't regress in accessibility. There is, for example, in GitHub there is free toolkit AATT accessible. Let me check that. Automated accessibility testing tools. Yep. You can use, for example, that, or Microsoft has a lot of great tools. Or if you Google around, then there are a lot of places you can get great tools. And these tests also work for your UI testing, so you can catch one bird with one stone. I created guidelines for our developers, so we would stop creating inaccessible software, and while we're fixing everything else, we would then develop new software to be accessible. Also, accessibility testing currently is part of our regression testing. As I told you before, I still sometimes go through our test suites with high contrast and getting less headaches. And fourth of all, and which has been most effective, is informing. So if you have an employee going to a conference talking about accessibility, then there's some kind of pressure for people to have his back and make your product truly something to be proud of. And I also did a similar presentation in my company, and I keep on nagging if somebody does something inaccessible, and people have started doing less and less and make more inclusive software over the time, because nobody wants me to come to their desk and say, yeah, but you again forgot about accessibility. How come? So these are some of the guidelines I wrote to my developers, and what we discovered is that it also improved our search engine optimization, for example. So it also, having accessible software also improves your visibility for Google. What we are planning. First of all, we still have some problems. We want to fix them. But we are currently moving on to use the principles of modern testing. And you see the 3 out of, it's basically guidelines that have been created for modern agile testing done by Alan Page and Brent Jensen, who also have a great podcast, A/B testing, Alan and Brent testing, not the other kind. You should listen to it. But yeah, basically they wrote down main principles what the quality engineer or tester of the future should keep in mind. And what we see is that we are starting to take more input from user data instead of saying that, yeah, the QA guy, he knows what the customers think. Well, you know the secret, I don't. And yeah, but what we are trying to now implement, if we get this user feedback, is also getting feedback that whether people with screen readers are using our product, if they used mouse or maybe they operated with keyboard only, and also yeah, basically, and through that we actually try to be more accessible if we get more input, but also as I started out saying that people at making your product more accessible makes it more accessible for everyone. If you have logical paths through your product with keyboard only, or you have special shortcuts, then it will make operating your product faster for everyone. So we're trying to also get feedback that if we implement some kind of accessibility aid, how it influences other people, and we hope that it influences them, and the positive things we keep, and negative things we try again, so until we have the best product, fastest operatable, and by everyone. So here are some great tools you can use. For example, web accessibility in mind. It's you get a lot of articles and a lot of code examples how you can design your product more accessible, how you can fix your accessibility mistakes. So Microsoft inclusive design page also, at least if it has some great tools, but it mostly it also changes how you think about inclusive design and accessibility, and WCAG guidelines, where they have good examples, they have bad examples, they have simple fix ideas how you can fix your code in at least JavaScript. I think there were some other codes also. So it's a great resource, and also you will see what the future will be. And you can also contact me via LinkedIn or my personal email. And while answering questions, I will leave you with this code of ethics of Association of Software Testers to think about next time you do your testing or developing something. But yeah, I will answer your questions now. Thank you.